Good morning and welcome to San Diego People. I'm Allen Denton. Today on the 1000th episode of San Diego People, we'll be talking to two of our local representatives. We'll take a look at a variety of current topics, including the economy, immigration issues, health care, and the war in Afghanistan. Today we'll be talking to Democratic Congressman Bob Filner, but joining me right now, Republican Congressman Brian Bilbray. Welcome to the program.
Great to be with you, Alan.
First off, let's talk a little bit about the economy. Unemployment's at 10% or close to it right now. There are concerns of a double-dip recession. Yet Democrats point to the fact that we've had 4 consecutive quarters of growth. We're seeing mixed signals, but the average person on the street is out of work right now. What's going on? What's wrong? What do we need to do to fix it?
I'll tell you, it's really scary. We just saw Callaway, one of our large employers here, the largest manufacturer of golf clubs in the world, announced they're moving out of San Diego, moving out of the country. That's the kind of things you want to, for 3 years I've been trying to get, working with the local delegation to get a law passed that they wouldn't be taxed more than imported golf clubs. But we are looking at the possibility of going into that double dip, and that is scary. We're right on the edge, and this is why it's really scary to see Washington doing a lot of stuff that may spook people away from making that extra investment and exposing themselves to the possibility of profit or loss. And right now is not the time we want to make investors nervous. Investors matter right now.
The average person who may be out of a job or close to being out of a job is sitting at home and saying, why isn't Washington doing more to create jobs, to stimulate job growth?
I think the problem is that we're trying to think that writing a check, spending money in itself, is what really makes jobs. And the fact is, trying to make it easy people to invest, people to hire, make it easier for people to get into small businesses and expand. And a lot of that means government changing the way we operate. Our regulations need to be smarter. We got to look at what we can do to change stuff and be able to implement it. How can we make it easier for people to be successful in investing their money, in investing in new jobs? And that, looking at business as being a partner with the government, not an enemy of the people. It is an essential part of it. In our country, the majority of services, essential services, jobs, housing, food, all those things are provided by the private sector. The government only augments it and supplements it, but the real backbone has to be in the private sector. That's why we've had wealth in the past, and that's what we're going to need for the future.
Most business people would tell you we need more incentives. We're uncertain about Obamacare. There are a combination of things out there on the horizon that are keeping them from hiring right now. And we've got to get that changed in order to get this economy going.
Yeah, it's scaring them to death is what it's doing. And for it to be meant to do or not, the fact is a lot of things have been done in the last few months in Washington that were agendas that weren't really tied to creating jobs and stimulating the economy. A lot of it was just a lot of things that were on a wish list that was thrown in. We need to pull back from that. We need to talk about what we can actually do. And it really scares me when I see that Washington sort of uses a crisis to exploit for other political agendas rather than concentrate and putting your eye on the ball saying, look, the people want jobs. They want it now. They don't want to have to wait 4, 5, 6, 10 years, and we need to concentrate on that. These other issues that we may want to do someday, should be put on the hold and aim for those jobs, and the economy matters. It's the economy, stupid, to paraphrase.
Give me some specifics. 1, 2, and 3. What do we need to do to stimulate job growth? First, second, third. What do we need to do?
I know it sounds easy, but the fact is government and regulation across the board. What is government doing to help? We want to talk about energy independence. We ought to be taking a look at what government is doing or not doing to take care of that. We talk about spending money, but are we willing to change our regulations? And a good example is you've got 155 applications for solar panel farms out in the Mojave Desert to the federal government. Not one has been approved, basically because why approve it? I get a job in the government even if it isn't approved. We need to be proactive. We ought to be talking about what are we doing to make algae production and that kind of thing that our scientists here in San Diego have developed. But they are taking it out of the state and going to New Mexico, and they may leave the country because of government obstructionism regulation. All I got to say is that we've got to first change the attitude that the private sector is the enemy and go understand that the private sector is an essential ally of those of us in government, and we're here to help the American people to prosper in the private sector, that government cannot replace the private sector as the mainstay of prosperity. And that's the first thing. Right now, you're seeing Washington writing checks right and left, deciding who's a winner and loser. And now you're seeing the backlash of a lot of those checks were written in manners that nobody can justify.
We're also hearing from Wall Street that this administration is anti-business. But as you just mentioned, we had a huge stimulus package passed, and the government has written a lot of checks. So where has that money gone, and why has it not stifled and funneled down to the average business to help that business person create jobs?
Because the average business does not have a lobbyist in Washington cutting the deal in the back room. And I don't care if it's Republican or Democrat. The fact is that when you have the people in D.C. deciding who gets the money, it's not going to be the average person on the street or the person looking to develop and expand their small business. It's going to be the big guy. Inherently.
So we saw the banks get the money.
You see the banks have it. You see the big companies getting breaks back and forth. You saw BP getting big breaks. You're seeing the car manufacturers getting big breaks. But those small companies that produce 80% of the new jobs, they're not able to have the connections with the big guys in D.C. to be able to be at that table. They are actually cut out of it. But they have to pay the taxes to pay the bills that are coming down the line. And that's what's really scaring a lot of people. They're looking at the fact that for every $3 we're spending this year, $1 is borrowed. And these businesses know that eventually they're going to be up for the tab for money that they didn't even get to see, but the big guys in Washington
All right,
distribute.
what about extending the Bush tax cuts? Secretary Geithner said it's only going to add to the deficit because it's only going to affect, what, 2% of the top earners or something like that. Yet many economists disagree. They say, you know, if you don't extend the tax cuts, it will take this economy down even further. Will Congress compromise on those tax cuts and come up with some sort of extension? Do you think?
I think, Alan, that Democrats and Republicans are trying to find something. And the biggest issue is the Democrats that have been talking about a long time, saying that the Bush tax cuts, which I wasn't there, say that the Bush cuts were all for the rich. Now you're hearing the leadership of the people that were bad-mouthing the tax cuts saying, oh, we're going to save the middle class part of those tax cuts. And it's kind of funny. The rules of, you know, the lines have changed. The fact is all of these tax cuts were made to basically make sure the private sector had more capital. It's actually more important to have that capital in the private sector than it was at that time. What we ought to be looking at is doing what the American people are doing around this country, and that is cutting our expenses, reducing our overhead, not going up. Think about this. People are saying in Washington, the way to get out of this is to put ourselves deeper in debt. Don't worry about how much you're going to pay for it. Don't worry about how you're ever going to pay it. Well, that's how we got into this trouble. When individuals made the same attitude, we created this crisis. We got to make sure that Washington doesn't make the same mistake, and that's what we've been doing. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of people questioning our strategies.
Let's change topics just a minute. Illegal immigration. A federal appeals court this week says that it won't weigh in on Arizona's new, or last week actually, won't weigh on Arizona's new immigration law. This leaves the state in a real bind when it comes to enforcement. Your take on what's going to happen there?
Well, what was sort of interesting on this is a judge that ruled against Arizona said that for foreign nationals, she didn't even address the American citizens. She said foreign nationals to carry their IDs, their documentation, would be an undue burden, so she relieved them of that burden. What she has done now is create a situation just the opposite of what she claimed to do. Every state in the union, foreign nationals have to carry their immigration documents, except Arizona now. So she's created a donut hole where she claimed that she was trying to correct it. And I think the biggest problem here is let's agree. If the rest of the country had done the common sense thing that Arizona did 2 years ago, and that is require every employer to check on a computer that Social Security numbers match before you hire somebody. If everybody had done that, Arizona wouldn't have been in the crisis and doing this self-defense to try to defend their neighborhoods and pass this. If we had done the right thing as a nation and crack down on illegal employers, which are the source, Arizona wouldn't even be on the headlines today.
Well, it's obviously going to be on the headlines for some time to come, and a story we'll continue to watch, too. All right, Congressman Bilbray, thanks for being with us. We're going to talk